I guess we're live. I tried changing a couple settings in OBS, so we'll see how that affects our results today. Well, this is going to be an interesting exercise, actually. Let me jump down to not Blender, but Vegas. Probably some people are wondering, why are you animating in Blender today? And that's a fair question. We'll get to it here shortly. Well, when we were doing our work yesterday, we knocked out this shot, this shot, this shot, actually this shot, and this shot. So pretty productive, pretty productive. I would say in 5.5 hours of live streaming, I probably got about 4 hours of work done. So I was doing a lot of blabbing. So today, I'm going to try to do less socio-political commentary, focus more on the hard work of animation. That's what we want to do, the hard work of animation. And so, well, the reason I'm live streaming actually a little later today is because I had some stuff I had to do earlier. And while that stuff was being done, let me switch to my webcam only camera. I drew all this out. Okay? So this is going to be hard to see, but don't worry, I've already scanned it. And in fact, I'm going to go throw this over there, get it out of my face. And let's jump up to here. And, well, actually, even better, I think it's already open in Krita. Yeah, okay, so let me go back to Krita. Okay, so what I did was I scanned this in. So this might be somewhat interesting to some of you. This is kind of what happens when I actually use paper. Okay, so today I used paper, and it's a lot of fun. I actually bought these, I bought mechanical pencil 0.7 millimeter lead in red and blue probably a year ago or something, just because the whole idea of doing anime style pencil tests on paper was just kind of an interesting idea, you know. And so I use them quite a bit to when I work on paper. It's kind of useful. Typically what I'll do is sketch it out in red, then tighten things up with a regular pencil, and then use blue for shadows, and then sort of alternate between colors for making notes so I understand what the heck I had in mind. Which speaks, by the way, directly to the question of why do I have as a title of the stream today, Animating in Blender. And the reason is because we're going to go through this, this shot breakdown, and you'll see that there's a fair amount of content that can be reused, and I even wrote some indications, as you see right here, of where some reuse will occur. And so we're going to have some pretty serious changes in scale and camera moves if we want to take all the content on this page, combine it into a single shot. Bottom line is, it would be useful to have an infinite canvas, number one, and it would be useful to be able to do some camera moves, because there's actually 2 different smash zooms programmed into this shot. Okay? So I'm not going to promise that we're going to get through the whole shot, and I'm not even going to promise that the work in Blender will be successful, but I'm going to try. And I think it's probably going to work out just fine. Now, one thing I want to say to you, if you are a Blender 2.8 plus fanboy, meaning Blender 2.92 at this point in history, be advised right out of the gate, I'm not going to use Blender 2.8 plus. I'm going to do it in 2.79. So if that makes you mad and you don't like that and you want to leave, I promise I will not hold it against you. You do what you need to do. I'm going to do what I need to do. Because Blender 2.8 is fine and it's great, but for my personal application, the only thing it gives me over Blender 2.79 actually is the fill tool. And 9 times out of 10, when I'm doing coloring work at the ink and paint stage, 9 times out of 10, I'm not even using the fill tool, even in Krita. I'm using the freehand path tool to draw shapes and fill in areas of color, kind of sort of the hard way. So I can see my concurrent viewers just dropped from 6 or 7 down to 4. So that means everybody's mad at me because I'm using Blender 2.79. I get it, folks. Again, that's perfectly fine. I don't mind. But let's get busy now and actually talk about what the job is that we got to do. So do we want to look at some context first? I suppose it wouldn't be a horrible idea. But let's do that. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's just transition up here and look at it in the storyboard. So I'm going to scroll down here in the storyboard, kind of down to the zone that we've been working with lately. Of course, this is yesterday's work. We did not do the medium shot. We did the long shot, but we didn't do this medium shot. So this medium shot should pretty much be cake, because what we will do, I just don't want to do it today because I did all this pencil work and mapped out this new shot, and I want to have the fun of doing that shot. So anyway, we've got this background here, as you can see, that we're gonna that is actually this shot that you're seeing right here. So we're going to be able to blow up this background to get this background, and then we're going to be able to shrink down these two characters to get them into this shot. So it's really just going to be sort of some logistical grunt work. So the shot that I blocked out on paper is essentially this. Tianara is sulking. She notices a bird singing in the tree. She looks up at the tree and she says, "Oh yeah, sure, you can sing. You're free as a..." And she stops. The bird kind of cocks its head and looks at her quizzically, and she giggles. Well, yeah, obviously you are a bird, because obviously the saying is free as a bird. But the point is, you're free. You can do what you want, blah, 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 blah. Go where you want. And then that actually ends the sequence, because we transition from this sequence into Mel back at the river saying essentially the same thing. You can do what you want. You're free, blah, 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 blah. So this is a bit of a shameless pilfer, I will freely admit, from Aladdin, because there was something in the movie Aladdin that was kind of sort of similar to this, where it sort of faded from Jasmine to Aladdin, where they were sort of repeating each other's words. This has come up in the past, probably back at the time when I was either doing the storyboard or writing the script. Here's the true confession is, I came up with this as just a simple transition device between the two sequences, not realizing that I had stolen it shamelessly from Aladdin. And it's not exactly the same, but it's really the same device. So thanks, Rohit. I assume I'm saying Rohit correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so that's really where we're at in terms of the sequence. That brings us up to here. And what we're going to try to do is actually roll all these shots up to pretty much up to here. Gosh, you know, we're really going to roll all these into a single shot. And that's, again, why I'm going to try doing this in Blender. And that is 18 seconds, looks like. It seems to me this should take longer than 18 seconds, but we'll see. We will see. Okay, so now let's go back here and kind of recap what the plan is, because now what we're going to do is go through what is the actual plan. So I did this morning while I was sitting in the van waiting for Val to take care of her business. And so shot number 1 is Tianara sulking. So that's kind of a medium wide, not really wide, but it's kind of a medium shot. Okay, so this is shot number 1. Then we go to shot number 2. We take essentially, let me see if I have a brush here. Essentially, we should be able to take this this shot and effectively just blow it up. Okay, so this goes back to why I'm using Blender. Because with Blender, I can actually draw this and scale it up or down. And if I need to, I'll make adjustments to the grease pencil strokes so that it renders nicely at whatever scale I'm currently operating at. But the bottom line is I'll be able to scale the stuff. And we have, especially if this was framed, something like this. If this was framed pretty tightly, then the change in scale from this wide shot to here would be sufficiently great that if I do it in Krita, I'm going to have to redraw her, whereas in Blender I won't have to. Now, I'm going to leave this open to judgment as I progress along, because I may change my mind as the shot actually comes together. But because technically these are not the same exact shot, you can see the difference in angle here. She's a little more... Okay, so you can see that difference. But we will leave that up to judgment as we progress. So the initial shot, if we say that our full screen that I'm using right now is in fact the screen that you as the audience are going to see, then I would say this first shot, TNR would be about here in the shot. She would be sitting there kind of on the rule of thirds. Her face is actually right on the rule of thirds, as you can see. And that would be about the scale. When we go to shot number 2, we're probably jumping to something more like this. So probably still on the rule of thirds. Might not be quite that tight, but it's still pretty tight. Okay? So let's look at the notes here. The notes, as you can see, there's actually 2 renderings of her eyes. Here she's kind of down like this, kind of sulky, and then presumably her pupil moves over to there. Okay? And so you've got this initial pose, and then the blue is the second pose where her eyes pop open, and she's looking off to her left. So in the initial shot, as you can see, she's kind of looking forward because, again, based on what was going on in the shot before, she was just sulking. Here, she has noticed the birds, so basically this is what happens is you can hear the birds chirping in the background kind of thing. And this grabs her attention. Okay, so then what I blocked in here is I made a note of perhaps a blink in between, and so then that would be shot 2 and then shot 2.5, and I'm breaking shot 2 down into A, B, C, and D. This might be hard to see, but A would be this, where her eye is kind of looking back. B would be just a blink. C would be a repeat of this, and then D would be what's blue over here on the left, would be her eyes just kind of popping open to sort of figure out what it is she's seeing up in the tree. Okay, so essentially shot 2 has several components to it that involve mostly an eye blink. Okay, so now we're up to shot 3. Hey, just great. How you doing, buddy? I drew this sketch and to show a physical reaction. And after I drew it, it occurred to me, remember, we are working at 8 frames per second, okay? So that means and that's pretty much an economic decision, but it's also a creative decision, because I actually like the snap that you get with 8 frames per second animation, and it kind of suits the style of the show, which is kind of a hybrid between yeah, I would actually say it's like an Americanized anime. So that would be what Avatar: The Last Airbender is. It's essentially an anime, but it's got some sort of American characteristics to it. That's kind of the aesthetic I'm shooting for. And if you go back and watch Avatar, or even if you watch the sequel Korra, you will see that a great deal of the animation is all taking place at 8 frames a second. Okay, so with the caveat that normally camera moves happen at the either 12 or 24 frames a second, but that's another thing. Anyway, my point I made here was that probably this pose here is just a tween. So my lecture just a moment ago about 8 frames a second was all to say that we're going to go from this through this And this is probably only going to be on the screen for 1 frame. And it's going to be a transition, because then what's going to happen is you're going to actually see this happen. Okay, so let me get this positioned properly. If this is positioned about like that, then what you're seeing is you're going from this tight close-up to a smash zoom to this. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. So we're on a tight close-up of her, and then as it transitions through this one transitional pose, hey Ukami, the camera will zoom out as what I call a smash zoom to essentially this pose. Okay? So since this is number 2, and this transitional pose, which again is probably only 1 frame, so it'll probably be pretty sloppy. Since that's only 1 frame, the smash zoom brings us to shot number 4. Okay? Shot number 4, as I actually got through the whole breakdown, and then realized that shot number 4 is actually shot number 1. If you look at shot number 1, if you look at her positioning of her body, and then you go down here and you go, oh, wait a second, we can reuse this. This is the same shot as this, except the difference is that her head's just in a different position. Okay? Got that? So there's what we smash zoom to, because we want to see the tree in the foreground in silhouette, and we see the bird. So what I did was I drew 2 poses here of the bird kind of with his head cocked up in the air and then with his head more down, but basically the bird is just kind of jostling around singing, and perhaps its tail is wiggling around so we can kind of see that it's alive. But in point of fact, I think for this shot I'm going to prefer to have the bird in silhouette in the foreground. This branches across the screen, and then she's behind it, and here she is sitting on a rock, again exactly the same way she was here, but now she's looking up. Okay? So now this gets to the question of scale and why Blender, because after we go from shot 4, we literally do another smash zoom into this. Okay? And this is where she says, so this would be shot number 5, and this is where she says, oh, sure, you can sing. You're free as a... And then she giggles because she's like, yeah, duh, free as a bird. Obviously, you are a bird. So that's what the dialogue is. Okay, so now this brings up, again, the question of scale. If I'm going to draw this close-up, if I'm going to smash zoom to this, then it probably makes sense that I'm going to want to be able to take this head and this body and marry them together, and I will get this pose. Okay? And by the way, in the close-up, I drew her arms out wide like this, and that's what you see here as well. So what that means is that we are going from shot 3 through shot 3 to shot 4, and all she says is, I'm sorry, let me double check this. 2, 3, 4, smash zoom out, reuse number 1, and then 5A, I believe would be this. 5B is this. Okay, so her arms splay out, but what I'm looking at and kind of trying to remember here is shot 5 is her saying, oh sure. So I'm thinking what I intended was she simply says the words, oh sure, on this shot, on this wide shot. And then she continues her line of dialogue after the smash zoom to the close-up, and she says, you can sing. And then it cuts back to the wide shot, and that's what I'm calling 5B, where she says you're free as a bird. Now I may decide that that's kind of too much, that may be too much editing. So it may turn out that we want to really stay on the close-up, and then stairs, so we turn his head, and then D, the bird blinks. So we're kind of getting the same effect that I've gotten, a little bit of comedy value, like what I've done with the monkey in some other shots. So the idea is that the bird's chirping and he suddenly stops, turns his head, it's the same body throughout. Okay? So, hey, and by the way, I want to mention one of the changes I made in OBS was I changed the timeout on reconnecting. So just a moment ago, we lost our connection, and it looks like I changed my timeout to 3 seconds, and it looks like it did reconnect really, really quickly. So that's great. All right. Okay, so then shot number 7 equals, and notice here's the C++ programmer in me coming out. I'm using the double equal sign. 7 equals 1, but looking up and then giggling. So shot number 7 will actually be coming back to this shot, but with this head, which essentially amounts to this shot, but a little tighter. And that's when she kind of giggles. So, and I think that would probably be appropriate. So if you think about it, what we have is essentially 2 heads. We have 1 body, 2 heads, pretty much 2 versions of the bird, but this one's silhouette, so that's going to be dead easy. This one, it's all 1 body. So as you can see, there's really not that much work to do here. Okay, so how are we going to go about it? What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image. Let's jump out of full screen mode here. I've already copied this image into the folder for the shot, which is going to be 290, I believe. Yes, 290. So what I'm going to do is let's just go ahead and import the image into Blender, and then what we're going to do is we're going to let me think about this for a minute. I have a choice. My choice is going to be to animate the breakdown that we just looked at, or animate the camera. It would be way smarter to animate the camera, because that means that we can do all of our grease pencil work, and then the animation, we're not going to have to scale our grease pencil stuff. We're just going to be moving our camera around. Okay, hope that makes sense. If you're not real familiar with Blender, that might be a little confusing, but we'll get to it, and hopefully it'll all make sense here shortly. So what I'm going to do is go to shot 290, and as you can see, this right here is my I can do a thumbnail views here. So what I want to do is I want to turn on emit, and that's going to make it so I can make this self-illuminating, essentially. By the way, in case you're wondering what these movie files are, these are actually some videos I took some time ago before it got real cold, and actually got some really good recordings of the birds chirping. So anyway, there's that, and there it is. Okay. So now we want to think about, I'm going to hit the, I'm going to actually hit the tilde key. Now in Blender, I'll just kind of explain this as I go, just because some people may find it interesting. Blender's layer system, it's somewhat changed in Blender 2.8 because I think it's fair to say, if Amar was around, he could correct me on this if I'm wrong, but basically, for 20 years, what we've had in Blender is essentially 20 layers. You know, you can put stuff in different layers and then isolate those layers. With Blender 2.8, that's kind of been smashed to where it's like infinite. You know, because the layering system is really implemented in a completely different way, having to do with what they call collections. Not going to say, you know, good or bad how I feel about the collections thing. I think that what I can say with Blender is this: wherever Blender has been changed in 2.8 forward to make your work more powerful and flexible, it's done a pretty good job of that in exchange for the loss of simplicity. So it's just always this trade-off where you gain capabilities, but what used to be as simple isn't as simple anymore. And you see that in Blender 2.8 with the masking system. It used to be that with the grease pencil in 2.8, you could just click an icon and a layer would be treated as a mask. Now we have the ability to do much more complex masking, but the problem is well, I shouldn't say the problem. The trade-off is that you have to take a couple more extra steps to set it up correctly. This is always the way it is. These are the trade-offs that we always deal with. So, okay, what I'm going to do here as a matter of due diligence is I'm going to take this breakdown and I'm going to hit the G key Y. So I'm moving this back on the Y-axis. Now my situation is a little unusual. I'm hitting Control, by the way, so it snaps. I'm just going to go back one notch on the Y-axis. And then I'm going to scale it up. You can see over here in the camera view. I'm just going to scale it up so it's kind of, sort of in the zone that we want. Okay? And I'm going to save. Blender doesn't crash very often, but just to be safe, I'm going to save my work. Okay. Now we are in object mode. So what I was saying about layers is that my camera, I have to actually check here. I think my camera is in layer, okay, my camera is in layer 10. And by default, I'm usually only showing layer 1. And the reason for that is because I want to hide the camera, basically. I want to keep the camera on a separate layer so I don't have to think about it being in the way of whatever else I'm working with, which is usually either grease pencil or it's going to be what we have here with the breakdown, which is a plane with an image mapped onto it, which is a great way to deal with animation in Blender, by the way. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and do the breakdown as an animatic. Okay, so now that's what we're going to learn how to do right now. First of all, consider the following. By moving this plane back on the Y-axis, I have gotten it out of the way of my grease pencil stuff, because my grease pencil is going to be drawn on the 3D Spaces origin right here where you see the cursor, this thing. Okay, that's where we're going to be drawing. So I wanted to get the plane back out of the way. I'm not using the plane as a surface to draw on. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but in this case I don't really want to do it that way. So what I want to do is turn this static breakdown into an animatic. The easiest way to do that is going to be to animate the camera, and then all my camera animation will be there so that once I've done all the grease pencil work, it's pretty much edited itself, right? So now I'm going to hit the 0 key, so I'm now looking through the camera. Okay, because the camera is selected, any translations that I do are going to be translations affecting the camera. Therefore, what I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to do one more thing before I go too far. My camera is going to be doing a fair amount of zooming and panning, and frankly, I don't really want that camera bumping into my I don't want the camera bumping into my grease pencil stuff either. So what I'm going to do is jump into my other screen over here, and let's go look at the characteristics of our camera. Why don't we give this a focal length? Let's give it like 80. Let's try that. Yeah, okay. All right. And now I'm hitting Control, left arrow, right arrow to just jump between screens. The reason I did that is so that I can hit G, Y, which moves me on the Y-axis, and I just get my camera way the heck out of the way. Okay? Hitting the save key. Now I'm hitting 0, and I'm going back to the camera. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start animating the camera. All right? So any keyframes that appear down here in the dope sheet are going to be... actually, I need to jump out of... This is what we're seeing right now is the grease pencil dope sheet. That's not what I want to see. I want to see the regular scene dope sheet. Okay? And for my current purposes, I am going to turn on auto keyframing because it just saves me a step when I animate the camera. Now when I animate the camera, automatically a keyframe appears. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to just go through our shots and set them up so that the framing makes sense. All right, so I'm going to hit GY. I'm moving the camera on the Y-axis, and I'm going to frame this up. Okay. And GY again. I would say that is, I'm kind of squinting so that I have to conscientiously ignore this stuff over here. I don't really want to be thinking about any of that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go to frame 2. I'm not going to worry about timing right now. Okay? Now what I'm going to do, because she's basically centered, I think what I'll do here is center her again. But now I'm going to hit GY. So again, I'm moving the camera on the Y-axis, and I'm going to frame this up. GY. If I hit Shift, it makes my so if I hit the G key and then hit Shift, I can move the mouse quite a lot, and really the actual change in the translation is quite small. So that gives me a lot of control. So when you want to control your translations, you just hit the Shift key. Okay, so not sure. Let me hit GY, and again I'm hitting Shift so that this is kind of gradual. Okay, G key, Shift. Just want to frame her up a little bit wider. Okay, so now if we jump between frames 1 and 2, we're jumping between these two shots. And by the way, I reserve the right to change my mind at any time and decide that the way I did this wasn't the smartest, because that could happen. All right, I'm going to hit GY, and I'm actually just ballparking this one transitional frame. And let's actually say, yeah, ultimately this is going to be a smash zoom, so let's just kind of leave it a little loose at this point. A lot of this is kind of an iterative process of just kind of trying different things and seeing how it works. But I would say something like that. Because I drew her larger, that kind of, I don't actually need to. Okay, actually, yes. Let me pause a moment and clarify something. As I'm doing this, I'm realizing that I did make a mistake in terms of being able to reuse my camera animation. Actually, I'm not going to be able to reuse my camera animation like I thought I would. Here's why. If this drawing here is in fact this exact grease pencil drawing, which I expect it will be, so the camera's going to move in from wide to close, and that's why we're using Blender, is so that I can have the scalability of the grease pencil. Well, I initially drew this much larger, so that means that to go from this to this, I'm actually going to have to move the camera a lot more. Okay, so therefore, probably this preliminary camera animation is going to turn out not to be that useful, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and kind of frame up our bird. Okay, so those are my shots. Boom, 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 boom. So let's use those as a guide, and what we'll do is I'm not going to even try to I'm not going to put in any animation keys on the grease pencil, and I'm not going to try to do any interpolation on the camera. This camera animation is strictly so I can just see what the heck I'm doing with my grease pencil. Now the good news on this particular shot is that I don't really have to do a pencil test because it's already been done for me, which means I should be able to sort of jump straight to ink. Let's find out. So I'm going to go into Edit Strokes mode, and I'm going to grab my ink color, and I'm actually going to save my work. There's one thing I want to do. Yeah, let's go back into object mode. Let me grab this, and I kind of have two screens I use most of the time, but what I want to do is go into here, and the same way I normally see, if I use the emit, actually blowing it out probably isn't a bad idea. But the other thing we could do is tweak the transparency. Let's see. Yeah, we can alpha should be able to. Now that's interesting how that drops. I have a suspicion of why that happens, but I don't know for sure, so I won't get into it. But I'm gonna go ahead and blow it out and turn down the transparency. That at least gets me in the ballpark. So control right arrow. Okay, so just for the record, if anybody has any questions or any of that sort of thing, just speak up, and I will be going back and checking my messages every so often. Okay, so let me just think about this for a minute. I think step one is I'm going to use super smooth ink. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go for the maximum clarity in my lines, but I'm not going to necessarily try to keep my lines closed in the way that you would if you were going to do fill operations. So, what does that mean? I'm going to hit the D key for draw, and I'm actually going to just kind of dive right in here and get this girl inked. I am not going to concern myself particularly with getting my shapes closed because I don't plan on using the fill tool anyway. I'm going to go ahead and draw her face, but ultimately what might wind up happening is that I may want to wind up putting the facial features on a separate layer. Tianara has pretty green eyes, so I'm going to say... So this brush that I'm using, what I'm calling my super smooth ink, has... that didn't quite work. Has a fair amount of smoothing baked into it so that every time you do a stroke, there's some sort of post-smoothing that takes place. Okay, I'm not going to draw this little dot on her forehead because no questions for me for the moment. Okay, right on. So, yeah, I mean, this will be, like I said, I always want to give that disclaimer that I reserve the right to fail. I'm doing this in Blender because I think it's the right choice for this particular shot, but it might, you never know. Every time I leave Krita, it seems like I wind up finding out it was more hassle than it was worth, but we'll see. We will see. I just love Tianara. I think she's just beautiful. Isn't that bizarre? I'm sort of attached to my characters, I think. That's one of the cool things about writing your own properties, is you do sort of get acquainted with the characters and their various personalities and foibles, and sometimes you get a little bit attached to them, actually. Why, that's perfectly natural, perfectly natural. All right, and I'm just going to hit my right mouse button so I can sort of clean that up a bit. Put these wrinkles in here. Just keep it on the sketchy side. A lot of the volumes are going to be ultimately wind up being defined by the shadows as we add shadows. And by the way, what might actually happen is a lot of this may wind up being taken out of Blender and just brought back into Krita for some post-production touch-up work. We'll see. I'm very attached to my characters. Well, you should be, Dizzy. You should be. Your characters are your characters. Make this very simple. Very simple. And there's supposed to be a little indication of her foot there. Obviously an indication of her knee there. Some kind of light lines to... Okay. Alrighty then. I don't really want this translations window open. I actually just want maximal access to alpha mode sky so that we get our white background so I can just see a little bit better what I've got. Okay, I want to check something. Seems like I'm not quite sure why I'm not seeing my grease pencils. Oh, wait, did I hit F12? I did. I hit F12. I've got to hit F10, silly. Okay, so I'm hitting the 1 key. 1, 2, 4. Okay, so at scale, her grease pencil strokes are they're probably going to want to be thinned down a little bit. So let's jump to key number 2 and see what we've got. Okay, so yeah, this is, we once again, we can see where the, embarrassing though it may be to admit, I am actually going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to hit the A key to deselect everything, and I'm actually going to delete the camera animation because it turns out it just provided more hassle than it was worth. It's not really helping. What I need to do is use the breakdown as a guide and redo the camera moves based on what's actually there in the shot. Which, by the way, means I may be jumping back to this for reference purposes in Krita. Because what I really need to do now is hit the tab key to go into object mode, grab my camera, and what I need to do is go on the y-axis and zoom into the grease pencil strokes. This is what I really wanted to do. Hope this is making sense for you folks. Okay. And actually, I'll even go further. I'll say that for my purposes, this is actually turning out to be more of a distraction than it's worth. It's not helping at all. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Well, actually, strike that. I might need it for tracing. So anyway, there's shot number 2. And she's going to have to... Let me just think about this for a minute. This is where it really is a lot easier in Krita because I can think in terms of flat layers as opposed to thinking about data management. That probably doesn't make sense to you guys out there, but hey, Darren. Yeah, I changed the OBS. Oh my gosh. Okay, how come nobody bothered to tell me I was on the wrong screen still? I'm sitting here working, and I'm on the wrong screen, and nobody even mentions it. That means you guys are listening to me, but not actually watching. What is up with that? What is up with that? Unfreaking believable. Okay, so here's the wide shot. We jump in close, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep animating only as necessary. So what I'm going to do is go to the next key. And what did I say I was going to do? I said I was going to close her eyes. So I'm going to grab these points, boom, boom, and delete the strokes. Grab these points, delete the strokes. And I better come back here to the grease pencil dope sheet. And okay, that's interesting. So I better wiggle this. The reason I wiggled that right there is because if I don't wiggle it, I see what happened. Okay, I'm going to have to hit undo a few times, unfortunately. I made a boo-boo. Okay. So right here, what I need to do is hit the G key and hit the wiggle. Because what that does is it inserts a keyframe here. And actually, to be fair, I guess I didn't need to do that. This might be confusing for you. But it kind of speaks to the reason why I don't actually do much work in programs other than Krita lately. The reason why is, this is a little confusing. I'm doing my animation as I go along, so the camera animation, the only reason we went from this shot to this shot was because of the camera. So I didn't actually need another grease pencil key. Okay? So actually, I keep saying actually, I want to really clarify for you guys what I'm trying to say here and why this is somewhat problematic. Okay. From here to here, what you see happening there is not the grease pencil, it's the camera. So what we really need to do is change the grease pencil strokes on frame 3, but we've got this other, the regular dope sheet that has the camera moving on frame 2. Now ultimately, of course, these keyframes are going to be spread apart and there's going to be some interpolation going on, but the point is that there are actually 3 shots here. 2 with the camera and 2 with the grease pencil. And since they're on different dope sheets, this becomes, the chore becomes keeping track of it all in your head and managing your data, which is not the most fun thing ever. Okay, so as far as her expression goes, I am going to, and by the way, let's stop everything for half a second here. I should have, there's another mistake I've made. I should have hit the star key, which for me isolates the current grease pencil layer. Because as you can see, if you look down here, you can see that the grease pencil, when I made a change in the sketch layer, it actually added keyframes in every layer, which, depending on your point of view, might think seems kind of stupid. I would tend to agree with you. The only way you can prevent that is by isolating the current layer, which I just did. So now the keyframes will only be created on the actual frame I'm working on. Okay, so now what I want to do here is duplicate this key, because according to my plan I'm going to need that, and then I need to add another key. This one, let me see here. I'm hitting the L key to select linked. Okay, and I'm going to move this one a little more, L key. And now I'm going to actually, this is where we kind of can have a little bit of fun potentially with the grease pencil. Because we can just mush things around. Now for the most part I'm going to stick to the paradigm of frame by frame animation here. So I'm not really looking to do a lot of, I'm not planning to like do interpolation between these different grease pencil strokes. Sometimes that's useful and important, sometimes it's not. Now I'm going to do something that maybe you don't know how to do. Here's what you do. You hit the, you draw your shape, and then you hit the L key to select linked, and then you hit Shift Alt S. And what it does is it takes your strokes and moves them towards being a circle, a perfect circle. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. Now in this case, I kind of want her eye to be up higher. So what I'm going to do is hit the G key, come over here, hit A to select none, and then I'm going to actually lasso some of these strokes, or some of these points. X, delete the points, select L for select linked, hit the G key, R for rotate, and move this back into position. So as you guys can see, any of you who didn't believe me in recent days, when I claimed that I actually have some facility with Blender, now you're finding out that I wasn't joking. I really have been. I've actually used Blender for 20 years. Rotate. Okay, let's pull out a little bit and see if the scale looks kind of sort of okay. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, watch this, this will be interesting. I'm going to go duplicate, and then I'm going to hit Shift L again, and that doesn't quite want to work. So what I'm going to do is grab these 2 points, scale them together like that, hit L for select linked, and then Shift Alt S, which is going to turn that into a circle. S key to size it, G key to move it over here into position. Alright. Okay, can't do that. Shift D to duplicate. Gonna make this one slightly, ever so slightly smaller. G key to center, back it up, and there we go. There's our expression. So I would say for simplicity, organizational simplicity, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to make this mod to her eyebrows, but I'm doing it on a separate keyframe because I can always delete the other keyframe. You know, I can always delete the ones I'm not using. So this is all good. It's all working. Okay, let's see what this looks like rendered. Not too shabby. This is actual size right there. Okay, looking at the, yep, no questions, no comments, no nothing. So, all right. So there's that. And we'll just go to the next shot, which, referring back here, we've got this tween that we need to do. So let's do the tween. And I'm going to hit the, oops, sorry guys. I needed to hit escape, grab this, and I'm just going to whip this into position and actually stop. I'm going to hit Z. I'm turning off auto keying. I do not want to be creating a bunch of erroneous keyframes. So at times, maybe I'll want things keyframed, but for now, I don't. So I'm going to go back to edit strokes mode. Well, actually I can't. I need to go to object mode so I can, what I meant to say is I'm going to go back to the grease pencil dope sheet. Okay, so what we're going to do now is drag this into position here. We're going to size it. What is it? Is it Shift Tab? Actually, I think I have to just do it with the old mouse. So I'm going to go into edit strokes mode. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lasso all of this, and I want to just ruthlessly delete it. Just ruthlessly delete those points. I just don't want to be distracted by any of the drawing. Okay? So now we already established that, by the way, this particular drawing is almost surely going to be nothing but a tween. It's going to be on the screen for literally one frame. So we can be a little loosey-goosey with it. A little loosey-goosey, but not too loosey-goosey. So what makes this a little bit complicated for me compared to working with Krita is that I'm used to a workflow that allows me to float pretty seamlessly between pencil test, ink and paint, post-production effects. I'm sort of used to being able to seamlessly jump around in Krita in a way that is going to be considerably harder to do in Blender. Okay, what I'm looking at here is I'm trying to ferret out why. Obviously there was another keyframe right here, and it appears to me that I inadvertently deleted that keyframe. Well, it's the quintessential mistake. Oh, wait a second. Okay, hold on. Hit the Z key. Okay, so again, I want to emphasize this. This is where it, again, can get to be a little bit frustrating and or complicated. You see what's happened here? Okay, so her body's here and her head's here, but because I started like an idiot drawing on this frame before I created a keyframe, What it actually did was delete the body when I started drawing the new head. Okay, my only point in terms of the practicalities of your workflow is that now I've got an extra step I need to take. And I don't know if the following is going to work. I truly don't. So what I'm hoping... I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to hit Control C. I'm going to go back to this frame and hope. Ah, it worked. Whew, that's good. Okay. So, now one thing that's really good about Blender, by the way, is that it remembers and maintains your selections between frames. It definitely makes it a little easier to jump around and make corrections. So, anyway, what I was kind of bemoaning is just the you just really need to be attentive to data management. You just do. All right, D key. I'm going to go ahead and go like this. I've got the onion skins on, which I tend to usually not have them on. So that's making the, you know, with between that and having the background image, obviously the scenario looks somewhat confused here. But I'm just checking some things about her, some of these details like her neck line. Okay, this last key doesn't even need to be in here. And I'm also going to go ahead and turn off the onion skins because I almost never like having them in there. And so if we jump back to object mode, we're supposed to be here. Question, let me jump back to Krita so it's just a little clearer. I didn't really give an indication of what was going on with her hands. Obviously, in this wide shot, it drops behind where you can't see it, so I think that's probably what I need to do. The easiest thing to do here to make my life a little simpler would be just move this out of the way because it's really making it hard to see what the heck's going on. So I'm going to go now back to edit strokes mode and we can get busy again. All right, so let's lasso these and just get rid of them. So there's a few things that I'm saying as I'm working here that might not be totally clear to you guys in terms of the points I'm making about workflow. A lot of times when you're dealing with Blender and you're dealing with grease pencil, one of the selling points of using the grease pencil is that you can mush and massage points and strokes around and then interpolate keyframes between them. So ostensibly Blender does some of the animation work for you. Okay, I see what happened. My bad. Because I didn't put in a keyframe. I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm actually going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of all my keys. Auto keyframing is turned off, so whoops. So now I should be able to just move this out of the way and be okay. Here's hoping. Nope. Okay, it still wants to move. Okay, so let me just look here. Ah, right. Of course. I need to move it out of the way and then insert a location key. Silly, silly, silly. Silly, silly goose. So many things to remember. Too many things to remember. Okay. Dope sheet, grease pencil. Okay. So, what were we getting at? The Blender idea of being able to do keyframe interpolation is quite specifically not what I'm trying to do here today. I'm completely favoring working with Blender in the same manner that I normally work in Krita, where I just draw whatever I want to see on the screen, I just draw it. So here what you have is you're just going to see this one frame transition, and the fact that the camera is going to be doing a smash zoom on this obviously distended and exaggerated pose. Since the camera is going to be in really rapid, fast motion, we will be forgiven the fact that her hand is going to move from here to a different position between those two shots. Hope that makes sense. Hey, Mar. So I'm going to jump back here. And so we've gotten through shot 1. We've gotten through shot 2. We've got the eye blinks in there. We've got this tween in there. And we're going to smash zoom out to this. Okay, we're reusing number 1. So that means that actually, yeah, what we need to do here, so remember, this is the key thing that I made. The mistake I made earlier is I want to start drawing, but I don't want to delete what I already have. There's 2 ways I can do that. One is to just grab some points and wiggle them, and that causes a new keyframe to be inserted. The other way, which Amar would probably point out for you guys if I wasn't here to beat him to it, is you can turn on additive drawing, which causes new grease pencil strokes to just be added to the old ones. Okay? I'll turn on additive drawing, and hey, we'll kind of see how it goes. So now what I'm going to do, again, keeping in the spirit of self animation, the spirit of what I normally do in Krita, I'm not going to try to do any sort of keyframe interpolation. I simply want to just get rid of those strokes and redraw the new key. So I'm going to hit the tab key, jump into object mode, and what I want to do is take my next pose. Okay, this is the pose. However, actually this is the pose, because remember, this is just a zoom in of the others. So let's just use this as what we're going to trace in order to get her looking right. All right, so G key, and look at that. That's like magic, isn't it? Knock that sucker right into shape. Okay. Problem is, I see what the problem is. Sorry. Another stupid attack on my part. I have to jump back to the dope sheet, and actually what I need to do is just delete all the keys. We don't need any keyframes. And because automatic keyframing is turned off, happily, that means that I can now move my guide around and not have it cause me issues. See, watch. See how it doesn't jump around now? That's because Dave is being a little bit less stupid than I was a minute ago. Okay, so let's just compare this. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, except the problem is, oh my gosh, I hate to say this. I'm trying not to complain here, folks. But do you see what just happened? Again, because of the ongoing issue of data management and having to really pay attention to your keyframes and what you're doing, I'm being dramatic because I'm trying to extend my frustration and anger at the moment, so I don't actually start calling out expletives. Why, you might wonder? Because if you notice, this shot right here got deleted. It's gone. I inadvertently deleted my keyframe, and it just blew right past me. So that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna, kind of sort of compensate for that and just keep moving forward. So let's get back into edit strokes mode and delete this stuff. And all right. So I just want to kind of, her head should be stretching up a little bit. Back into edit strokes mode, and now let's just rock and roll and get this in here. D key, D key, little bit of a nose indication. The mouth, gosh, I don't even know if I should put the mouth in because it's just going to have to be removed later anyway when we do ink and paint, because we're going to have to put the mouth on a different layer so we can do the lip sync, because she's actually got quite a bit of dialogue going on here. So as you can see, when I move quickly like this, you can see how the smoothing is acting on the brush. So just going to use our grease pencil capabilities to our best advantage. Okay, little bit of a deal here. I'm gonna overrule. In the original breakdown, I actually had her changing her basic view orientation a bit, so that the camera was kind of looking up at her. I can see right now that that was probably a poor idea, and I'm gonna actually make my eraser a little bigger. So, no onion skinning. Dude, I just turned it off, actually, just a little bit ago. You know me, man. Onion skins are useful. Here they are. I can turn them on. But more often than not, I prefer to just toggle between my keys and just feel how the animation's progressing. It's purely just a personal preference. And then in most software, I do find that the onion skins just crowd the scene and make it hard to see what's going on. So again, draw a circle ish, and if you're not happy with it, right mouse click, hit L, Shift Alt S, and turn that shape into an actual proper circle. And then what I often find myself doing with the grease pencil too is then immediately hitting Shift D, and then take this one, scale it down, and then that becomes your pupils, like so. So we'll come over here, Shift D, boom. Okay. And her eyebrows are kind of in a, we're just going to draw them in there. I think for now I'll go ahead and put an indication of her little thing that I don't know what it's actually called. And then I want to get my guide out of there for the purpose of being able to see a little more clearly. So I'm going to hit Alt. I wonder if I hit Alt. Nope, that's not going to work. I don't want to do that. Okay, that's interesting. Why is it showing me I did not make a duplicate of that? Okay, this is weird. I'm going to save my work, because what's going on right now seems a little strange to me. Maybe I did have a duplicate of it. So I'm just going to reset that and get it out of the way. Okay, so now you can kind of see what's going on here with the grease pencil. The scale of your character makes a big difference in terms of what you get. I don't love the quality of the lines I get. You can get really nice quality lines. Definitely depends on the brush you use, but I generally do find I need to sort of jump in close and then add some somewhat more delicate lines to sort of make things look a little more better, let's just say, for lack of proper English. Okay, yeah, I just tweaked the settings so they work because they're helpful, but that's the way traditionally using the flipping method, right? Okay, so what do we have here? This, I would say, is going to be something like this. So actually, yeah, and I just want that hand down there like that. Okay. Let's jump back here. Okay, so we know we're going to need a pose where her arms are out. So why don't we just do that? I don't think the order really matters because ultimately we're going to be cutting to the bird anyway and stuff like that. So let's just delete this out of here. Generally, the way I actually do this is I hit Control. Whoops, sorry. Not supposed to be in object mode. In edit strokes mode, I hit Control and then just lasso. But look what's about to happen. I'm about to delete this arm, and I'm going to delete the eyes as well, because Blender remembered its selection. It remembers that those eyes were selected, and so I was adding to the selection. That's not what I wanted to do. So it's, again, one of those cases where I really need to pay attention to what I'm doing, or I'm going to shoot myself in the foot, which I've done, what, 3 or 4 times already today. So, but that's the price you pay. So let's go here, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just just feel it, man. And in fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump into sketch mode and switch back to my pencil. This way I can draw, I can sketch in what I'm trying to do and then just turn the sketch color off and I won't see it later when it's time to render. So this is really what I'm trying to accomplish here. And I want this shoulder maybe to be a little bit more, what would the word be? I don't know. Up, distended, who knows. I'm going to delete these lines as well because they're not helping, they're really only distracting. You can see a little hint of her bosom in this shot, but yeah, I think that's probably pretty close to what I'm after. So I'm going to give just a rough indication here on the hand for the moment. Okay, so that's going to fall behind there. This is going to fall in front like so, and let's see if things are kind of sort of what we're after. I think so. So we can't really play it back in real time because it's going to blow by too fast. But now what I'm going to do is go ahead and move this forward one frame. Let's go ahead and ink this properly, and then I will go back and redo that tween. So no big deal. Boom, 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 boom. A little bit of wrinkle action. There we go. There we go. A little bit of wrinkle action. And again, not concerning myself with closing my shapes because I know that I'm going to have to do a little extra work on the color side anyway, so who cares? No point trying to fight what you know you're going to have to do one way or the other. Okay, so this is going to kind of make this look a little more natural. Erase, erase, erase. Boom, boom. And yeah. Oh yeah. So as you can see, by the way, if any of you guys want to weigh in, OBS just disconnected and reconnected, which of course it often does, but I changed the reconnect timeout attempt from 10 seconds to 3. And it does appear to me that while we are getting the occasional blanking out today, it seems to me that it's coming back on quite a bit quicker. So if we can't eliminate the occasional dropout, at least we can eliminate the wait between when it drops out and when it reconnects, right? So okay. So now we got to do the tween. Well, the tween is actually going from this. Let me look at the breakdown. Let's just back up here and take a peek. Okay, we were already on the close-up, and when we go through the tween, her arms are in the down position. So, can I explain that again? So what we're actually going to see on screen is going to look about like this, actually. It's going to be something like that. And we're going to tween through that to this in a wide shot. I don't... Well, this is interesting. I'm kind of surprised at myself. How much trouble I'm having managing my keyframes. So if she's going to turn her head up, if you wonder what the heck I'm talking about, yeah, okay, I'm glad it came back quicker. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, we've got the shift to the head being up looking at the screen, but we don't actually need the hands out. So that's where I'm having to, Mr. Dyslexia is having to think in reverse to figure out what I really need here. We're going from the medium shot to the close-up, through the tween to the wide shot, so when we go to the wide shot with the head up, the hands are supposed to be down. That means this is wrong, because we've got the head up and we've got the arms out, but we needed one tween where the arms are down. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to duplicate this key, and I'm just going to do it this way. We'll see how this goes. But let's just look at okay. Okay, I'm going to leave that there for a moment. Okay. This is where the onion skins help, because then I can see what the exact position was here. And once I get it in position, we can turn it back off. So this is going to be a little tricky. But that's okay. Tricky's okay. If I hit the X key and delete the stroke, I can go in here and get rid of the extraneous noise that's giving me a little bit of grief. And I cannot claim that this is like, you know, the best way to be working in Blender. But, and that's because what I'm trying to do here is a little bit ambitious, and perhaps one could say a little bit stupid, because I'm trying to, you know, again, combine all this entire sequence into a single shot. So, you know, I expected there to be issues. Okay, so I'm hitting the L key, select linked, hitting the G key so I can just basically move this ink line a little bit. And if I wanted to, I could actually grab these 2 points and hit the S key and just scrolling my middle mouse button to change the influence. Just bring those together. You can do stuff like that all the time, you know, it's kind of nice. Alright, so now I'm going to grab my D key and checking for any Amar, you retracted a message. I want to know what you said, man. I want to know what you're trying to hide there, dude. What's the big secret, pal? Yeah. Alright, so this will come up like that. Yeah, this is definitely, I will say when I color this is going to be quite an interesting exercise. If I do it all the hard way by just drawing shapes, it'll probably come out pretty easy and intuitive-ish. But we shall see. So what I need to do here is a little winky. I need to go, and just get rid of her arm, essentially. That's cool. That'll work. I think that works. I would say this is a little questionable. Okay. Wrong emoji, huh? Yeah, I hate when I get the wrong emoji. Amar's emoji challenged today. I hate when that happens. Okay, back to our storyboard. Well, honestly, we're pretty close to done with Tianara. Now it's all about, maybe to a degree, expressions. So what I'm going to do is actually make a couple adjustments here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to change my proportional editing tool to projected 2D. And what that does is it, instead of acting on the current stroke that's selected, it will actually do kind of, you know, kind of the magical thing which is act on all the strokes. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just basically compensating here for, whoops, don't want to do that. I'm trying to stretch her face. Now, there's more than one way to do what I'm doing right here. You could also do it this way. You could hit the E key, I'm sorry, DE, which pops up the pie menu for the stroke editing options. And it's in grab mode right now. So now I can be drawing with the D key the way I've been doing, but at any time I can press E and actually massage these strokes around like that. Okay? So it's up to you. You can massage the strokes with the sculpting tool like I'm doing right now, or you can massage the strokes by in edit mode, just grabbing a point but having proportional editing turned on. Both work fine. You know, it's just a matter of what you're kind of into that day, I would say. Okay, what was the difference here? Okay, nothing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just confirming, yeah, I'm going to get rid of that keyframe and just move this one back. Okay, I just wanted to make that little correction on her forever emoji and acronym challenge. Yeah, you and me both, dude. Okay. Let's just take a look at a couple things. First of all, we've got auto keyframing turned off, so we can look at what this is going to look like. Now, if this was rendered right now, it would look like this. That's not too bad. The scale of the ink lines maybe could be a little bit thinner. Now, you can deal with that on a layer basis over here by simply taking the thickness option here and just cranking it down like this. You can actually modify the thickness of an entire layer in one fell swoop. This is another one of those things that's a little simpler and easier to get to, you know, sort of intuitively and quickly in Blender 2.79 at the cost of a little less flexibility than you have in Blender 2.8. Okay, so that probably looks better. And the thing about it is, this thickness setting can be animated. Did you know that? So that means that if I go into object mode and grab my camera and say, well, okay, but I know that I'm going to be doing some close-ups here. Okay, fine. So let's go ahead and grab a close-up of her while she's ranting and raving. Now let's render that. Now we see that the strokes are a little too thin. They're a little too thin. And so here we want to jump to maybe a 1 pixel compensation. That's actually probably too much. So I think between my tight close-ups, oopsie poo, sorry guys. Between my tight close-ups and my wide shots, there's really only about a 1 pixel modification to the stroke thickness that we need to make. But we do need to make it. It's going to definitely affect the way things look if we don't make those changes. So, okay. So now we're on a new key, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into Edit Strokes mode, and I'm going to turn off additive drawing, so that now when I hit the D key and draw something, D, up, it deletes everything. And that's because I'm jumping back here into my storyboard, and I want to draw the bird from her perspective. Let me think about this for half a second. Actually, before we do that, Jim, let me tell you something. For my money, and I've explained this in other videos, the truth of the matter is almost everything. I will say this about Blender 2.8. I'll try not to get into a rant here. Here's the reality. Most of the features that are in 2.8 Grease Pencil, some of them are a little tighter, a little better implemented. I think the brush engine's a little smoother, yada, yada, yada. Most of all the capabilities of the Blender Grease Pencil were already there in Blender 2.79 on the one hand, and on the other hand, all of the features of the Grease Pencil that are new are still rather incomplete, buggy, immature. The combination of Blender 2.79 Grease Pencil with occasionally taking the extra step of rendering out your Grease Pencil to an image sequence and then bringing it back into Blender by mapping it to a plane. Those two activities together give you all the capabilities, as far as I'm concerned, of Blender 2.8 Grease Pencil, and they're better. The key reason they're better is two things. Number one, actually three things. The implementation of bones and the ability to set up a rig is much stronger with image planes than it is with the Grease Pencil. It's actually very buggy in 2.8. It basically doesn't work at all. So rigging is a non-starter in Blender 2.8 Plus. Number two, all the benefits of Blender 2.8 as far as the lights and effects are things that were already present in Blender and work fine with image planes. What was number three? Can't remember what number three was. But, so yeah, absolutely. I use Blender 2.79 because Blender 2... Oh, well, the other thing is, you could argue that Blender 2.8, well, you can have multiple grease pencil objects. Well, yeah, but if you're willing to take 1 minute to pre-render, you've just freed up your grease pencil object. Because you bring your, I could bring Tianara back into this shot as an image sequence map to a plane. I still have all the ability to massage my keyframes and my timing, because remember, you can animate the change of frames in an image sequence, when it switches from frame 1 to frame 2 or whatever. You can animate all of that. You can run it in reverse, you can do a hold, you can do all of that. You've always been able to do that for years. I wouldn't say that, but I mean, it's not like I haven't been around the block with Blender 2.8. I have. I get it. I understand what's the big selling point. All I'm saying is it's really immature, and when I rant about it, it's because, remember, all of the benefits of Blender 2.79, which is really 2.5, hang on. All the benefits of 2.5, which we're enjoying here in 2.79, took 10 years! Okay? From the time it was going to be so wonderful with Blender 2.5 to the real, what we have here, which is the most mature version of it. It's very usable, including all the grease pencil stuff, took 10 years. It took from 2010 to 2020. Well, okay, technically 2018. So if you wonder why I'm not always all on board with the latest version of this and the latest version of that, it's not because I'm a Luddite. It's because I've done it. I've been around the block. I've tried it. And you wind up wasting a lot of time. Cool new features that actually are mature and usable are kind of rare. Now, everything about Eevee, I mean, there is so much about 2.8 that is awesome. Okay? Believe me, if you're going to be new to Blender, you don't want to. I find it a little annoying that all the rigging stuff is completely useless, because if you take a grease pencil object in Blender 2.8 and just take 2 bones and then just use interpolated weighting and just map it to the grease pencil object and then move the bones and see how it deforms. You try that. You do that on your own time and see what happens. You'll be cursing at your computer screen. I guarantee you. It literally doesn't work at all. It's many times worse than basic rigging in Blender circa 2002, when we were dealing with Blender like 2 point, well, no, it would have been, it would have been like the 2.0 series, Okay, done ranting. Okay, so now there's one thing I need to do here. What I'm going to do is I am going to actually put this on a different layer. Okay, so I'm going to go star key. Hello, I need to be in edit strokes mode. But this is kind of an important step I'm taking right now. Okay, so I'm hitting the star key to solo the layer, and I'm going to go to a different layer, whole camera. Okay, so when the shot is framed like this, and we've got the tree with the bird in silhouette, the way my mouse is moving in the front, we're going to want to have that laid over top of her using all of her different keyframes. So I really want them to be completely separate, right? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and change the name of this to bird. And I yeah, we'll call it bird, and we'll put all of the bird stuff in this layer. Okay. So now I should hit star again, because otherwise every time I um, draw anything, it's going to create new keyframes for me that I don't necessarily want. So what I'm going to do here is actually just go like this. Okay. Now you can see right there, actually, I'm gonna make this more sketchy and keep drawing new strokes, specifically because I really don't want the smoothing. I could switch brushes, but there's not really a need to do that right now. It's just as good to just do it this way. So I just want to have this tree that's in silhouette in the foreground, maybe a little branch here. I don't quite like that. Little branch here. We'll just kind of indicate that branch. And then I reserve the right to obviously change the scale anytime I want to anything. And now actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit the M key, which is going to move the strokes I just drew to a new layer. And I'm going to say, Blender, go ahead and create a new layer completely. And then we'll come over here and just change the name of this layer to tree. Okay, so I'm going to isolate that layer, change the name to tree, because I really don't want the bird and the tree on the same layer. Hitting the star key to de-isolate the layer, so I can grab the bird layer and re-isolate. Okay, so now, by the way, let me check something here. Okay, yeah, definitely don't want those tree strokes to be selected. Okay, so I'm going to look at Amar's comments now. I liked in 10 plus years ago, but what's happening with the grease pencil, sculpting and modeling? Well, you do rigging the way you would in Moho or Animate to make it work. Yeah, I mean, rigging either 3D geometry or planes, images mapped to flat planes, typically subdivided. Doing that in Blender is very, very, very good. It's very controllable. You don't have to do a bunch of weight painting typically. The rigging stuff in Blender is absolutely state of the art. With the stop motion stuff, you can do the shape key or sculpts are cool. I tend to find myself using shape keys a lot. Yeah, I mean clay animation, right? If that's what you're into. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw my bird. Let's jump back here and just kind of reference it. So we've basically got two angles on the bird. We've got this angle where it's actually kind of looking, okay, yeah, I mean it's kind of looking out this way. So I basically wanted it to be clear in silhouette. So let's just do that. I'll jump into my sketch color and my pencil so I can just kind of get it blocked in. It doesn't matter where the bird is in the drawing at this point. Why did the bird just disappear? Draw a line, the line disappears. Okay? If you are out there and you know what the heck just happened, tell me. If you know what just happened. I'm on the bird layer. Ah, there it is. Sorry about that. I knew it. I knew it. And I think, yeah. By the way, my hotkeys, if I hit Control Star, it actually isolates the current color, which means I can hit the A key to select all strokes and delete them so I can correct the mistake I just made. Now I hit Control Star again to unsolo the color, and I can get back to drawing. So sorry, that was just a stupid attack on my part. What I was about to say is that the scale and shape of the bird relative to the tree or relative to Tianara is utterly irrelevant because I can always just change it after the fact. If I created a bunch of strokes where you know, you got some animation that's sort of baked into your keys, into your frames, such that you would have to go through and resize every single keyframe, don't forget, in Blender 2.79, and by the way, it is easier in 2.79 than it is in 2.8. You come right over here, you just add an empty to your scene, and then you come over here and you just parent your grease pencil layer to the empty. Then when you scale the empty, everything in that grease pencil layer gets scaled over all of your animation and keyframes. So you can use grease pencil layers parented to empties to actually set up rigs in 2.79. And it works just fine. You cannot have multiple grease pencil objects, but what you can do is parent the layers to empties or whatever in order to set up a rig and get the benefit of multiple grease pencil objects. In fact, I could take 5 layers over here and parent them all to the same thing. Take 6 more layers and parent them to another empty so they can move independently in the 3D space, yada, 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 everything you want to do. So yeah, technically there's not multiple grease pencil objects, but as far as the functionality, it's all there. Just saying. Just saying. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go like this. And now I'm going to go like, grab this. Rotate. Ooh, we don't want that much influence. We want a little change. Okay. And that's okay. It's not quite right, but that's okay because this is just the sketch anyway, right? This is just our guide. Okay, so that pretty much matches what we had in our storyboard. These 2 poses right here. Ba-dum-bum, ba-dum-bum. So what we'll probably wind up doing is kind of taking the bird, and as far as animation goes, we'll probably wiggle it a little bit and then have it. You will probably do something like that to just sell the idea that the bird is singing. Now here we're going to hit actually just draw, since we do not have, actually let me check this. Let's save ourselves some work. Let's turn off proportional editing. Okay, so that's the O key, isn't it? Yeah, O key. Turn off proportional editing, and we'll go S to scale on the X axis at -1. Okay? So by scaling it at -1, what we did was essentially flipped it. Okay? So sorry about the rant there, folks. If you want to have rotations anchor on the cursor, just hit the period key, and that causes them to. Okay, so typically I actually hit the O key so that we have proportional editing activated, and as you can see, that kind of sort of gets the bird into a nice pose. Jumping back to Krita to just look at that. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I had in mind. And my 4 keys, which I really don't need to even do, the truth of the matter is, because because really the only thing that gets animated is the head. Okay, so to be perfectly accurate, if I hit the D key and put the bird's eye in there, okay, now I hit the O key to get rid of proportional editing, because all I want to do is just take this and rotate it like that, maybe move it a little bit into position there. So this is the bird kind of looking at Tianara, and then the same thing I did earlier. I'm going to just put my cursor right there. I'm going to go Shift X -1, and the strokes that were selected again just get flipped. Okay, and of course we can put the cursor wherever we want and rotate that as needed to sort of dial in the look that we're after, to sort of sell what we're trying to do animation wise. Okay, and the only thing that really gets animated there with the bird's head is that they blink. The bird blinks. Okay, hopefully that's making sense for you folks. File save. Alright, I'm looking at messages now. Amar, you are crowding the board here, buddy. Crowding the board. Oh, I guess you haven't said anything in a while. Enters the Super Mario tone when he clears the stage. Did I do that? Hey, Inio-san. How's it going, brother? All right, D key. Let's get rid of these strokes just so they're not crowding my page. And let's just kind of go back and see what we've got. Okay, so there is Tianara, and we're going to deal with framing later. But based on the story, or not storyboard, but the breakdown I did on paper, we've got all of the poses of Tianara that we need. We've got all the poses of the bird that we need. We've got the tree. So basically, guys, we are ready to start whipping this sucker into shape. Okay, question. How are we going to do this from the standpoint of, I think that my prior idea of doing a camera move was misguided. I'm not going to do a camera move. I'm going to leave the camera where it is and just make adjustments to the grease pencil strokes. Okay. Obviously, we need to ink the bird at some point in the future, so let's just be cognizant of that. And let's grab the tree. And let's look at the tree layer. Okay, question. I guess unfortunately I need to actually insert a blank keyframe. So I'm just going to hit the D key and boom, just draw so that it inserts a blank key there. The bird, I mean, technically the same thing, I suppose. So let's just hit the star key to de-isolate my layer, grab the bird layer, and just for clarity, I'm going to delete these two layers that aren't being used. So now I'm going to isolate the bird layer, and as you can see, going back here to the beginning, all I have to do is hit the D key and just put a mark somewhere, and it puts in a keyframe. Now we've gotten rid of the bird. Okay. So now, here's the slight challenge associated with where we go from here. The slight challenge, and I'm going to call this Tia. The slight challenge, other than the fact that I'm actually getting kind of hungry. What time is it? Whoa, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. No wonder. The slight challenge is in the fact that it doesn't do us any good to start moving things around if we're going to wind up adding color. So let's do it this way. Let's just go ahead and make sure that our constituent content is what we want it to be by sort of cleaning things up a bit. So I'm going to actually solo the sketch color right now. I'm hitting Control star. So I can go like this and hit the X key. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just cleaning my work up here. Cleaning things up. Okay. So all the elements that I need are here. And by the way, somewhat significantly, if you really wanted to, you could just take this stuff and, you know, render it out and then bring it in somewhere else for animation purposes. There's arguments both for and against, I guess I would say. But probably the wise next step would be to get a color key going. How are we going to do that? Well, not too tough. Any of these other shots from before, like 285, has the proper colors associated with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import an image as a plane, and now that becomes our color key. So how are we going to do our color key? Well, let's go to our colors one by one. And here's how you do it. I just brought this in on a plane, and it's set in emit mode. So that means that the colors we're seeing on the screen right now are, in fact, exactly the colors that are in the image. So that's a good thing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, this is her eye color. So I'm going to go to the color here, grab that, and click, and then copy that to here. Okay? Now, this is going to be her little bonnet thing. Click. And we're going to copy it to the stroke color as well. I'm not baking shadow colors in here at all. I'm going to do this in Blender the same way I do it in Krita. I'm just going to have a semi-transparent layer that does our shadows for us. Okay, so let's get her hair color. Boom, boom. There's her hair color. What about her teeth and eyes? Boom, boom, boom. And by the way, one of the benefits here in Blender, obviously, is that we can change these colors later if we want to for any reason. Okay, what about the flesh tone? Boom, boom, and boom. Okay, this is a pure white that we probably won't use. This is a black, pure black that we probably won't use. This is called typical skin. I am not going to be using that in this scene. White patch, or skin patch, we're not going to be using in this scene. Shadow we will definitely be using. Highlight we might be using because it's going to be just like shadow. It's semi-transparent. Ink, of course, we need because we've already baked that into several frames. So what I'm going to do is delete these erroneous colors that we don't need, and now we have the whole color key for Tianara. And well, actually, with one caveat, let's make a copy here. Let's grab this color, and I believe we want to copy color. Boom. Okay, and this color is going to be on the color wheel. It's typically kind of about like this. It's about something like that. But this is going to be the little dot on her forehead. And just for organizational purposes, I'm going to push that back up to the top. Okay, so that means I can delete this. I've got my color key, and there's no reason to keep that around. File, save. Okay, everybody on board? How come you decided to use Blender for this shot? Short answer, Max, is this. This shot is derived from this breakdown that I did on paper this morning. Okay, real quick recap. There's a medium shot, cuts to wide, does a smash zoom to a real wide shot with the bird in the foreground, does a smash zoom in, which brings us to this right here. We smash zoom into this close-up, and so what you can see is that we're going to have a high-res picture of her here that becomes this small picture here. Same thing here. We've got a medium shot here that becomes this close-up. When you've got these big variances of scale, but you don't want to have to keep redrawing it, then Blender can be a good place to go, because I only had to draw Tianara one time, and this serves as both my close-ups and my wide shots. So all I had to do here in Blender is just get all the key poses in there. Just go ahead and move things around in order to actually cut this into a sequence, which is going to be somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds long. So this is a long sequence we're working on today. At this point, I have 2 hours into it. So not too horrible. Let's just kind of see how things go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the Tia layer up top here, and I'm going to add a new layer. Okay? In the Blender Grease Pencil, the stacking of layers, and I'm going to just call this CLR for color. Important. The stacking of layers in the Blender Grease Pencil is completely the opposite of what you would expect from most software. Normally, the layer that's on top is stacked on top in terms of compositing. That is true in Blender 2.8 as well. In Blender 2.9, it is the opposite. The thinking in Blender 2.9 is that we are pouring these layers into the stack, and whatever falls to the bottom is actually composited on top. Therefore, my color needs to be above my lines so that they show up behind the lines. Thusly. Now, what I'm going to do here is, for these purposes, I would say, I'll say let's use super smooth ink and see how it goes, since that's what I used for my ink lines. Okay, so the thing we're going to be a little concerned about is bleed. Now everything is on the same plane, as you can see. So basically, if we get a little bleed here and there, there's really two ways we can look at the bleed. One is, don't worry about it, because it could turn out that if we rendered this, let's hit escape and hit F10, turns out that because of the simple resolution of the grease pencils into pixels, it turns out that the gaps got filled up for us. Okay? Hope that makes sense. Max, did I say 2.9? Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, if I said 2.9, I definitely meant 2.79. So sorry about that. Don't mean to confuse anyone out there. So a lot of times that's actually exactly what happens is with Blender 2.79, the way it renders the OpenGL render, it fixes the gaps for you, because obviously the grease pencil has infinite resolution, but it's got to resolve it to an HD frame and figure out where to actually put the pixels, and it does a pretty darn good job of it. Okay, I just saw Val walk by, so I'll tell you what, guys, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I've been at it for 2 hours, so I'm going to go 5. I'm going to leave this running for the moment, but I'm going to take 5, and I think I'm probably going to hit the I'm back. I'm back. I wanted to point out something for those of you who had a question, which nobody's asking, but if you had a question about Blender 2.79 from the standpoint of what if I want all the benefits of a true vector program in terms of my line thicknesses like you get in Anime Studio, obviously Flash or Adobe Animate, that type of thing. Be aware that that's completely available to you here as well. All you gotta do, and I'm gonna actually save my work so that, okay, all you gotta do is, once again, I'm in edit strokes mode. You just grab a point, and it's important that you have proportional editing turned on. Okay, so that's the O key. If it's turned off, what I'm about to show doesn't quite work. So I hit the O key, and what is it? Yes, it is. Okay, so I'm going to actually hit the comma so that my scaling is centered on the point, not on the cursor. But my point is, haha, no pun intended, is that if I hit Alt-S, the thickness of the grease pencil stroke gets scaled, and by rolling my middle mouse button, I can actually affect the influence of it. So if I want to really ease it in like that, so that then when I render it, you get, you know, this type of effect, no problem. It's right there for you. Okay. I don't typically use it, not on this project, because it's really not appropriate to the look that I'm after. But, and it is a lot of extra work to go in and massage your line thicknesses. But got my tasty beverage, by the way. Sorry about that tasty beverage sound. So the one thing in Blender 2.79 that's a little less than wonderful about doing this color work is that you really can't, there's not a good way to rotate the screen you know, perpendicular to the view. For what it's worth, there is an add-on for Blender 2.8 Plus that does do that pretty well. I tried it, used it. I think it was first available maybe for 2.9. I'm not sure. But it didn't work quite as well as advertised, and it doesn't work quite as nicely as what you get in Krita. But okay, let me check something. I just noticed, I just made a critical error. Okay, so now let's deal with our critical error intelligently. What I did was I made the quintessential mistake that I make all the time in Krita, which was I actually was just starting to draw my color in the wrong layer. And the reason I noticed that was because, as you can see right here, some of the lines got covered up. So this is the lines layer, and I was supposed to be in this layer. Well, guess what? That's not a big deal in Blender, because what I can do now is I'll hit Control Star to isolate the blue color, and I'm going to hit the A key to select all the strokes, and I'm just going to hit the M key to move them back to the color layer. And I just, hold on a second here. That's interesting. Okay. Let me turn this off. Okay, so that worked. So I've actually got the reverse problem as well, so no big deal. That means that I actually was kind of in the wrong place quite a while ago and didn't realize it. So again, Control Star, A to select all, M to move that to the T layer, A to reselect all, and as you can see now, all the strokes are in the T layer and all the color is in the color layer. So we're back to normal. So that would be considerably harder to fix in Krita unless you were keeping your color and your lines and everything in separate layers. But once you draw on the wrong layer, it's kind of tough to move them. So That's one of the few really substantial benefits to working in Blender. So now, again, I want to be in the color layer, and I can get back to work. So, okay, so one thing to consider here, let me just think about this for half a second. Okay, yeah, let me think about this. I know that the coloring for her, everything from the waist down, pretty much isn't going to change. So yeah, I'll just copy the strokes when the time comes. That should probably do the trick. So I'm going to grab her hair. And usually the way I do it is I just kind of doodle until I start running out of gas, and then I just kind of end the stroke and start a new one. Okay, right there, that's a little too far off the mark, I think. So this is going to take longer than it would take in Krita, or, you know, arguably in Blender 2.8, because I can't just patch any leaks that I see and then use a fill tool. So that's kind of one of the little disadvantages. But it's not exactly a deal breaker. So why use 2.79 instead of 2.8 or 2.9? Max, I'm not going to answer that actually, because I answered it really, really thoroughly earlier in the live stream, and I don't want to bore everybody else with having to hear it again. The short answer is that everything you can do in 2.8 except the fill tool, you can do in 2.79. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's true. So for me, there's just no really great compelling reason at this point in history. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. There's no great compelling reason to be using 2.8. And 2.8 comes with its own set of bugs and limitations and problems that, of course, everyone sort of minimizes when they're all Twitter-pated about a new version that's got lots of exciting new features. Those exciting new features, as I mentioned earlier in my rant, you know, we got lots of new features with 2.5 as well. And the 2.5 series took 10 years to really get mature to the point where, certainly, especially with the grease pencil, everything that ultimately wound up being really cool and usable took many, 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 many years to develop. So I have Blender 2.9 sitting right here on this machine, ready to go if I need it. And I've used it a lot. And my basic decision at this point is not interested. Thank you very much. Feel free to disagree. I'm sure there's plenty who do. And that's perfectly fine. Now look at that. See? Blender patched up all the gaps for me. That's nice. Alright. Okay, and this is actually the whites of her eyes. So this is where being able to rotate the screen would be kind of nice, because you could sort of, being right-handed, this is a little bit of an obnoxious move for me. So my plan at this point is to rock and roll on this for basically another hour, and then I'm going to be ducking out. Okay, it looks like we're still in pretty good shape as far as our gaps go. You know, again, I think it's significant to remember that these gaps actually don't matter much, because when you render it out, now that will change depending on the scale. If I scale it up so that she's the big close-up, all of a sudden those gaps might start appearing, and it might become a problem. So we definitely want to be aware of that. And And the simplest way to address that directly might turn out to be to actually just create a duplicate keyframe and make further adjustments in the close-up version of it. Okay, if you don't want to try to color something, but you want to just actually, like, I want to take this pupil and just turn it black, you can just grab the stroke like this, and what is it? Control-Shift-M, I think, is the hotkey. What is the move? Moves you to a new layer. I can't remember my own hotkey here. I set up a hotkey for this to reassign a stroke. Let me look at it. It's probably right here. Move to color. Control M. Yeah. So Control M. Boom. So I just moved. I took this stroke and moved it from my ink color, which doesn't have a fill, to my black ink fill color. Control M. Boom. Done. Not that useful that much of the time, but once in a while it is. Okay, so now, what about this, guys? I say, well, I don't want to have to be quite so careful. Okay, let's just do this then. But wait, Dave, that doesn't work. You just covered up all your other color. No, no. Just grab the stroke and hit page down a few times. Just hit page down. Put it on the bottom. Ba-dum bump, ba-dum bump. Okay? Just put her on the bottom. And by the way, if you click this little guy here, which I didn't even realize until recently was in Blender 2.79, but the draw and back option, super useful. Because now, again, I can be just as careless as I want to be. And look, it puts the color behind any other color that already existed on the layer. It's like using behind mode like I do all the time in Krita. So that's pretty cool. So the only thing that's really problematic is just basically not coloring outside of the lines for the most part. Boom. That's probably worth fixing. Do 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 do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, back to the old flesh tone. Still drawing on back. That allows me to essentially be less careful. What I used to do is have colors that had a stroke color that matched the ink lines that I want. And you can certainly do it that way, but I find that that's useful a lot less often than you would think. Let's do black ink fill. We'll just make the straps black and call it good. Oops. This is where we don't want drawn back. We want to be able to draw on the front. Okay, half a second. I'm going to look and see if there's any chat or questions. Is Blender like After Effects in terms of compositing? I would consider it better. I mean, After Effects is a pretty mature program, and obviously there's tons of plugins and all the rest, but Blender is a node-based compositor, which I think most people that do a lot of compositing would probably agree with me that a node-based compositor is more powerful because it allows you to take a node and branch it off in different directions and then bring them back together in whatever way you want. Whereas in After Effects, it's kind of one direction only because it's a stack. It's like the Blender grease pencil layers. It's just a stack. You don't have a way to have things in the stack split apart and recombine downstream. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but long story short is that Blender is more like the schematic in OpenToonz, which is also a node-based compositor, or Natron. Programs like Nuke or Shake or Fusion. Fusion is a node-based compositor. The color correction tools in Blender are probably not quite as good as a dedicated compositor might typically have, but they're still pretty good though. Okay, so now the cool thing is, what I can do here is on my color layer, let's see here. Okay, let me think about this for a minute. If I was working in Krita, I wouldn't even think twice about this. What I would do is I would just cover this up and stop. I really need to be in additive drawing mode because I want to be able to keep everything that I've already done and just change it a little bit, just to add to it. So I'm trying to make myself think. I'm trying to think Krita here, which is how would I do it if I was just painting and wasn't dealing with layers and vectors and blah, blah, blah. Don't know if that necessarily makes perfect sense. But okay, so now what I want to do is, this is actually just a duplicate. So just for simplicity, we'll jump it forward and make it a duplicate. And here, guess we're going to have to make some slight adjustments. Let's grab the eye color and let's just delete those strokes completely. And then we'll go in here and I'm not even 100% sure that I'm going to need this particular pose or frame, but we'll see. Okay, let's go forward, and I think here the best course of action would probably be to just redo these guys. So I'm going to get rid of those strokes. Oh, stop. Okay, because I didn't add a keyframe, it actually was deleting those strokes on this key. What you need to do is just hit the G key and wiggle your grease pencil strokes around a little bit so that Blender inserts a new key. Now I can go ahead and delete these strokes and it won't affect, as you can see, the prior key. If anything I'm doing is like, you know, like really unclear, you're like, what the heck did you just do? Just post a question, right? Post a question. If you post a question, I may question your post. Ooh, that's provocative. Boom. 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 Boom is the word. So would this be faster if I was... actually, you know what? For these eyes, I'm going to go click, click. I've selected black ink, Control M. Sorry, your mouse does need to be over the 3D workspace for that to work, okay? Keep going forward. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is and by the way, I really want to have this layer soloed, so I'm going to hit Control L. Delete those strokes. Delete those points. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. Linked. Okay, yeah, it's going to be faster to just go like this and select linked and redo them. Just redo them. Okay, so I'm going to kind of work in reverse to what I did before. And by the way, we still actually have to get rid of a few more here. Okay, that's fine. Now we'll just sloppily get these guys drawn back in there like so. Just whip it around like that. And then we'll come back and smack some more color over top of it. I'm seeing a bit of the sketch lines that I might have to take out. No biggie. Okay, let me check something here. Okay, you know, again, quintessential mistake. I just did the same thing again. And it's probably the most annoying thing I bump into with Blender. If you're not extremely cognizant of exactly what you're doing on what frame to what strokes, you will invariably, again and again, inadvertently destroy the previous keyframe because you don't realize you made changes that were actually being applied to the previous keyframe instead of the current one. Because you need to explicitly create a new keyframe on that other layer. Either by drawing something, say in additive drawing mode. Another thing you can't do in Blender that you can do obviously in Krita is just quickly sample your colors. Now this shot would have been interesting to do in Tahoma or OpenToonz as well, with the caveat that you probably would want to use a vector layer for the art, because the whole point was to have scalability in my art, so that I can have a shot that's used and look good as a super tight close-up or a fairly wide shot. Oops. Problem is, I personally, Darren T will have a different opinion on this, but I've never had good luck at all with vector layers in OpenToonz. For me, the only thing I can do with them that I find useful is if you want to use vectors and then convert them to a Toonz raster level before you do your paint work, then that can be okay. But I mean, it's my understanding that Tahoma has improved that situation somewhat. And my tests seem to confirm that the fill operations on vector layers in Tahoma is more reliable than in the current official version of OpenToonz. It's been pretty unreliable for quite a long time now, like years. Not altogether shocking. I mean, I think vector layers were a later add-on to OpenToonz, or the original Toonz software. So, yeah. Your mileage may vary. The problem you run into is you go and you color some vector layers in OpenToonz, and everything works fine. And then you go scale your layers, which kind of was the whole point of using vectors in the first place, and the fills just disappear. It like completely loses track of them. It's quite a can be quite an annoying thing. And obviously, oh, I was going to say, I thought we needed to redraw the pupils, but we don't, because they are actually in the ink layer. Even though I filled them with color, they actually reside in the ink layer. So I'm going to save my work. Hello, save. And I'm checking messages. I've had mixed results from vector levels. There's a couple new vector features that help, but they're still quite flaky. Well, yeah, the like, for example, the instantly filled in vector shapes in OpenToonz or Tahoma, you know, it's cool, but come on, the the freehand path tool in Krita is way, way, way more reliable. There's a lot of things about the kind of tug of war between vectors and pixels that pretty much rides on the question of scalability. You know, for me, 99% of the time, the reason you're going to use vectors is because you want to be able to scale your image, which is why I'm doing it here. Or perhaps you want to be able to use deformations. You know, you want to use deforming animation to, you know, to just do what you can do here with the grease pencil, which is mush your layers around. And you know, here's the thing. Here's the trade-off, and it's again why I favor a pixel-based approach typically. Is number one, the amount that you would ever want to scale something in practice turns out to not be a problem in actual, you know, real-world situations. Sometimes it's problematic, and so sometimes I will scale something up and realize, okay, I need to re-ink this because it's looking too much like it just got scaled up, you know. But really, it pretty much boils down to that. That's what the whole vector argument really is about, in my opinion, is just the ability to scale things or deform them. So then if you're going to be the pragmatic animator, which I'm trying to be, then you're going to say, well, okay, in practice, how often does that actually matter? How often does that actually save me any time or give me a better result? The point I'm coming around to is this. Here in Blender, theoretically, you could grab this arm right here and you could deform it, stretch it, create a new keyframe, yada, yada, yada. The problem is this arm is embedded in a layer with everything else, which means it's not a problem. But what that means is if you're going to be doing that, you have to plan in advance for the way you intend to rig things or manipulate them. Because if you don't plan in advance, trying to get it to work takes 10 times as long as simply just freaking redrawing it. Anybody want to weigh in and disagree? The auto in-betweener. Yeah, I mean, you have that here in Blender as well. We can do auto in-betweening of anything in the Blender Grease Pencil. So it's no different than the OpenToonz, other than the fact that it's better. I mean, I'll just tell you straight up, Darren, there's no question. The in-betweening and the predictability of the results and just, you know, kind of down the line is I would argue much better in Blender than it is in OpenToonz. And I know I can say that with some authority because I've used both of them plenty. And I can say that in practice, I don't. Oops. Let me hit undo. I have drawn back selected. I don't know if I can think of one situation ever. I'll try to think of it, but I don't think I've had one situation ever where I have used auto in-betweening in OpenToonz. And you know, based on that anime I was working on, you know I've used OpenToonz a lot. It just doesn't. It's just not that useful that often. Once in a blue moon. Okay, watch this man. Well, I don't want to. I was going to say I was going to just convert these to green, but the truth of the matter is I don't want to do that because I'll lose my outlines. So, I mean, I know I'm a bit of a jerk and I'm a little opinionated about that. You know, only because the soapbox I'm on my YouTube channel is the pragmatic animator, where your focus is not on whether something's possible in this or that software. That's not my focus. My focus is on what's your story, who are your characters, what are you actually doing, you know? Because otherwise, what's the point, you know? So again, at the risk of sounding like a bit of a smart aleck, you know, that's just my focus because, and you know, to be fair, I did it for years. remember, I started dealing with CG 3D animation in 1998. Actually, 97. Okay, I'm going to look here. I was using the tween today. Okay, cool. Save you plenty of time, work really well in the small capacity that I use them. If, you know, and if it works, man. Absolutely. I'm not going to argue that, you know, if you need it, you need it, and it can be definitely quite useful. The vector tools in Tahoma are awesome. You need to know how the workflow and then most of the line work converted to raster minus the eyes, nose, and mouth. Yeah, I agree that if you approach vectors in OpenToonz with the mindset you're probably going to convert them to a Toonz raster level, then I would say they can be quite nice because then you can go in and procedurally make little tweaks and adjustments to your outlines, especially if you're drawing challenged. If you don't consider yourself that great of an artist and you kind of need to be able to go in after the fact and make adjustments and stuff, which is true of a lot of people, then it's great because you can get really, really professional results without necessarily being a great artist. And I don't say that in a disparaging way at all. I certainly always took that approach to CGI, you know, modeling and stuff. Half the fun is the fact that you can make adjustments and, you know, find ways to make it work. Let me see here. I'm just going to slap this in and see how it goes. Okay, that's a little dangerous. Tell you what, let's do it this way. Okay, yeah. Let's grab this, linked, and I'm going to go Control C, and I'm going to jump back to this key and hit Control V. Look at that. I can just keep pasting it in there. Isn't that sweet? That's sweet. It makes my job easy peasy. Now, what's problematic is, and I'm really dancing with it in this case, but what would be problematic is if the first one that I did really wasn't quite in the right position, and I'm really close to that actually. It's not really quite perfect, but I think it's okay. Then, you know, you just cut and pasted it in there 5 times for no good reason. So, okay, so now this is interesting. Let's do this one this way. I have additive drawing turned on, so why don't we just expand on this one like this. Ba-doop boop ba-doop doop, ba-doop boop ba-doop boop. Like that. We'll just expand on it and then add the light blue back over top of it. No big deal. So how are we doing today? We are at, yeah, I mean, okay. I'm actually doing okay. Because here's the sort of, let's get into the economic realities of what I'm accomplishing today. When this is all said and done, it's going to be a sequence that's roughly at least 18 seconds long and maybe closer to 30 episode inside of somewhere between 2 and 3 months, literally all by myself. Now, I'm not married to the idea, by the way, guys, of doing everything all by myself. Okay, what situations are tweens best for? Darren, I'm going to leave it to you to answer that one, if you're inclined to do so. I will say this, Max. One of the best applications for tweens would be facial animation when you're changing expressions and you just want to use sculpting tools to mush things around, which in that respect I would put Blender and Krita on top, with OpenToonz a distant third. With OpenToonz you can move vectors around after you copy the frames, so the changes are baked in. But with Blender, it's highly intuitive. In other words, for example, in Blender, let's see I could go, let me undo this, and I'm going to save my work just so I can sort of dink around here a little bit. Okay, so now with all my layers selected, I could grab, say, her eyes, grab a point on the top and the point on the bottom, and I go scale on the z-axis. So, so again, I see that I blanked out here for a moment, so I'll just show this again. Scale on the z-axis. Look at that. Oh! So I could stretch this out, and in Blender, if I put these a couple frames separate from each other, I could then, with one hotkey, it'll calculate all the frames in between and smoothly transition between those two shapes. So for facial animation, it definitely can be quite useful. Okay, I want to just check this shot insofar as a render goes, and look at that. It looks like Blender has actually, because this is the actual size that it's going to be on on TV or on your device. So yeah, I mean, even though the grease pencil strokes have lots of disgusting gaps in them, in point of fact, those gaps don't actually happen in the real world. Now, if I take her and scale her way up, or zoom in with the camera, then those gaps will begin to appear. So I have to be a little bit careful. But this actually went okay. This is a little problematic up here. So let's go to the color layer. Color layer. I'm going to solo the layer again just so I'm not fighting against putting keyframes in layers where I didn't intend to. And I'm going to hit the D key. Okay, sorry. I've got drawn back selected. That needs to not be selected at this point, so that the grease pencil strokes are not sent to the back. And I'm just going to make a couple adjustments here to just tighten this up a little bit, just in case we need a close-up, which for this facial pose I happen to know already that we are going to need a close-up. So this is probably a little questionable. So fortunately Blender's pretty performant too, so having lots and lots of grease pencil strokes isn't really a costly thing. Okay, now let's go back here. For some reason her ink lines disappeared, so I think this must be kind of a... So here's what we're going to do. Boom. Up. Sorry, my bad. X. Additive drawing turned off. I hit D and boom, it inserts a blank key. Okay, so now here are all the keys of TNR. Now there's a few things I want to check and kind of be a little bit careful about here. Let's jump back here. Just make sure we're good with the colors. My eyes are being fooled a little bit because it sort of looks like the colors are too dark when in fact they're really not. Now, the ink lines, probably could be a skosh darker. So I think I'll just make them a skosh darker. Okay, 247. I have to confess, I am actually getting a little bit tired. My brain's starting to zone out a bit. So,
guess that comes with age. Oh, that comes with being an old fart like me. You get a little sleepy once in a while. Okie dokie. Well, let's create a shadow layer.
Let's call this SHD. I've been really,
Well, I've been really surprised how many people have asked me the same question on my YouTube channel. The question is, are you going to have voices on your program, on your show?
I've been asked this question like a lot, many times. For some reason, I think it's kind of cool in a way, but people people get pretty excited about voice acting. And of course, in my case, the answer is, this needs to be in front. So again, with Blender, the layer that you want in front actually needs to be lower on the stack, not higher. So being that I have a layer, or a color I should say, that's semi-transparent, you can see that if I add multiple iterations of it, it does stack up on top of itself and get darker and darker, which is probably a good thing in this case. So that I don't like. This I do. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of go through and do what I usually do and just kind of figure out where I think some shadows make sense. She is fundamentally backlit, as I recall. If we jump up here, Had to look twice there. I thought it was Old Man Time Lapse and I was watching Krita. I don't know what that is. I apologize. Maybe I should know, but
Old Man Krita, is that the voice? Is that what you're talking about, the voice I was doing? 'Cause I know it's a good voice. It's a really good one.
Well, I must say I really appreciate that.
Well, there's all kinds of voices a person can do if a person wanted to. But, you know, it really doesn't have to be that way. We all have our very unique creative capabilities that we try to use at our discretion.
Yeah, I love Mises to pieces.
remember Jinx? That was such a bad cartoon.
Yeah, I hate Mises to pieces. I said I love him, but I hate him.
Pixie and Dixie. Oh my gosh, that takes me back to when I was probably like 13 years old or something. That didn't quite work, did it?
Good news, everyone. It won't be long before we're finally finished with this.
Okay, I'm gonna let some of the highlights bleed through just a little bit here. Okay, this might require some editing. You can see the problem that's going on. This is why I always solo the layer. The reason I always hit the star key, and of course I forgot here, is I'm sitting here trying to grab the shadow, and 9 times out of 10, it's grabbing one of the other strokes below it. If the shadow layer was properly isolated, like I just did, then it would be impossible for me to accidentally grab the ink or color lines below. And so working this way, I can very easily whip this into shape. Okay? So now, what I was kind of getting at in terms of shading is I was looking at this to see if, yeah, I mean, she's backlit by the sun, but we don't really have an overall shadow, you know, that's actually biting into her face. So I would say maybe I could add something like this. I don't know, though. I don't even think that's helping. I don't think that's helping. I think that's just making things like too detailed. So I am going to go like that and leave it at this. Okay, so having done that, I can let that one keyframe prevail. Now instead of wiggling things around to create a new keyframe, I can just go Shift D down here in the dope sheet and just duplicate this. Okay, and now what I'm going to do, because my shadow layer is isolated, I cannot accidentally grab something that I didn't mean to grab. So now I'm going to grab all this stuff that's essentially noise. And let me look at this. I think I'm going to delete the strokes. So we're going to go X, delete the strokes. Okay, so that was pretty quick and easy, huh? So I'm going to add this little shadow action around there. Definitely want to have a strong shadow there. And I'm going to say double shadow under the neck. Okay, that's the one. Yeah, I don't know all my voices, so. All right.
Alrighty then. Well, I try to make voices that are kind of fun to listen to. That's what I do. Is it because I'm amazing?
No, not really. Okay, X stroke. This one probably needs to go. Yeah, that's like a bosom shadow that's in the wrong place. And by the way, it looks like we've got a little glitch on our color layer, but that's okay. For the moment, we'll ignore that. So let's just be quick about this. And what I'm going to do is make like that, and boom, look at that. Piece of cake. Alright, so same situation here. And her hand would be mostly in shadow. Looking good. Go forward. Okay, so here I'm just going to essentially hit the D key and boop. Creates a blank keyframe. Okay. You guys, it's almost 3 hours that I've been going, and I think I'm ready to take a break. The good news is, I think if I put 1 more hour in, I'm actually going to be able to focus mostly on just organizing my keyframe data and getting it ready to render. So the background I've already done, really. I can take the background from up here. So I think when this is all said and done, I will have been able to spend 4 hours to create a sequence that's going to actually wind up being about 18 to 30 seconds long. It's going to be somewhere between sort of that. We blanked out. Okay, we're back. Okay, so the shots average 4 seconds apiece, roughly. Some are 7 or 8, some are only 2, whatever, but it averages around 4. And this breakdown is 7 shots, so we would expect it at edit to come out to be around 28 seconds. So to knock out almost 30 seconds of show in 4 hours, that's where we want to be. And based on what I'm seeing right now, I think we're going to achieve that. However, I think for now I'm done. I may wind up live streaming again tonight, but I think for now it's time for me to call it good, because I'm starting to brain drain, starting to zone out a bit. 3 hours of focused work, and it's probably time for a break. So with that, I will say what I always say, which is there will be more later. You can be sure of it, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Post comments. Be sure to subscribe, like everybody always tells you. Hit the bell, whatever, so you know when I'm live streaming. And thanks for hanging out.